Yes, what's going on, guys? Tim Chase here, and today I'm going to be talking to you about high fat versus low fat diets and ultimately which one is best for you when you're trying to get lean, lose fat, get shredded, and basically look amazing. And we are going to assume that calories are the same and protein intake is the same for a high fat and a low fat diet. So in that case, a high fat diet, to keep the calories the same, means you're going to have a low carbohydrate intake. And now let's just ignore things like keto, so the extremes. But let's say you're taking in a low level of carbs and a high level of fat to hit your daily calories. This means that with low carb intake, your insulin levels are lower. This means, in theory, that you're going to burn more fat. So that is great. So this is where that idea, of that high fat diet comes in. So you have a high fat diet, you're then running on fats, you're burning more fat, brilliant. And this is kind of where that idea came from. People are backloading their carbs, so the whole day they're running on fats. And this is something that I used to always do with my clients. Problem is, the more fats you're taking in, if you're in a calorie surplus, obviously the more fats you're storing as well. So yes, you're burning more fat, but you're also storing more fat. Now, let's look at a low-fat diet. So, this was the old thing about, eat less fat. It's better for your cholesterol. You're eating less fat, therefore you're not going to get as fat. Now, with a low-fat diet, that would mean your carbohydrate intake is higher. Therefore, your insulin is therefore higher. So, you're going to burn less fat. But because you're also taking in less fat, you're going to store less fat. So you've got these two different situations, one where you're having a high fat diet and you're burning more fat, and in theory you're storing more fat, and the other extreme, low fat diet, you're burning less fat, but you're storing less fat. Now, really, the outcome is going to almost be the same. And this comes back to what I talk about over and over again. It's basically calories in versus calories out. Now, some people are going to find a higher fat diet better, and some are going to find a lower fat diet better for them and what works with their lifestyle, their satiety, what you enjoy, your mental function, your performance in the gym, and that sort of thing. So for me personally, if I'm keeping my calories the same, I personally prefer a higher carbohydrate diet. And that is because A, I absolutely love carbs, and B, I find I perform really well, having eaten carb meals the night before, morning of training, that sort of thing. Other people find that carbs make them sluggish, it makes them crave more food. And then for those people, the higher fat diet would be better. So I find I actually sleep better when I eat more carbs, and I don't sleep as well when I have lower carbs. Like I said, I train better, I feel like my mental function is better, and I'm less hungry when I eat more carbs. That's just me personally, but other people have the exact opposite. And this could be a mental thing, or it could be a physiological thing. But ultimately, there might be a little percent in it here and there where you could argue based on the science, higher fat is better than the lower fat. But ultimately, it comes down to calories in, calories out. And we really can't argue with that. So if you're eating more calories than you're burning and you're having a high fat or a low fat diet, you're going to probably put weight on. In the other hand, if you're eating less calories than you're burning, I think that's correct, yes, it is almost irrelevant if it's a high fat or a low fat, because you are going to lose weight. And if your protein intake is there, and if you're doing weight-based training, resistance training, you should be able to keep your muscle tissue as well if your diet is not too extreme. So really, in summary, it is kind of what is the best for you. And I would never say to exclude a macronutrient. So I'm not a big fan of eliminating carbs out your diet or completely eliminating fats, definitely not doing that. And obviously there's no chance you're eliminating protein. So for me personally, I go on a slightly lower protein intake currently. And I think that's because it kind of saves me a little bit of money and my stomach seems to prefer it. And I go on a slightly higher carb intake. The exact amounts of carbs I take, it depends on kind of what phase of training I'm in. So what I'll do is I tend to hit slightly over a gram of protein per pound of body weight, which is pretty low. So I'll sort of go maybe 1.5 on that. And then my fat's probably coming around sort of 60, 70 a day, which is relatively low, not crazy low. Some days it might even be slightly lower, some days slightly higher. And then I make up the rest of my calories through carbohydrate intake. But yeah, just to give you another analogy, I've said this a few times before, you could lose weight and get lean just eating 2 Mars bars a day. You could eat absolute rubbish. You could eat just fats and you're going to lose fat. You could eat just carbs, you're going to lose fat if you're in a big enough calorie deficit. Now, the optimal way for you to get lean, which is what you're all watching this for, will be to have a good balance of all those macronutrients, to make sure you're getting your micronutrients, like your minerals, your vitamins, getting them in so your health is optimal, for you to stay hydrated, for you to be nice and relaxed, for you to sleep, for you to do resistance training, for you to do some cardio to keep your heart healthy. That is ultimately going to be the best way. And the best diet is going to be the diet that you can stick to day in and day out. It's not the diet that you can do for 5 days and then ignore for 2 days a week. It's not the diet that you can suffer on for a month and then, just binge. Unless you've got like a fitness show or a shoot, then potentially you could sort of suffer for 8 to 12, 16 weeks. And then after that, you can then look after your health. But, if it's a lifestyle change you want and it's a bit more of a long-term goal and you're really focusing on getting lean and keeping the body weight off, then choose the approach, whether it's high fat, low fat, a moderate fat. Choose the approach that is best for you and your lifestyle. And don't be afraid to mix it up. One day, for example, on a training day, you might have a lower fat intake because you want higher carbs to fuel the performance of your training from carbs, if that's what you like. Another day, you might do the exact opposite and have a higher fat, lower carb intake on rest days. But I've had this discussion with personal trainers before. They were shocked when I was having the same amount of carbs on training and rest days. Ultimately, I didn't find any difference with regard to my physique. As long as I took not an extreme amount of carbs and fats, and my calories were matched, it didn't really matter. And I didn't even find it mattered if I had more calories on training and rest days, because yes, I'm burning more calories on the training days, but on the rest days I'm recovering, I'm repairing, and it will balance over the week. I think I made up a new word there, a balance. It will balance over the week. 3,000 calories every day over a week is going to be very similar to a 4,000, 2.5. You get the idea. When you add them all up, they will balance out over the week. And, the body is very efficient in adapting and changing. And people seem to think you need to do all these extremes to trick the body. You don't really need to trick the body. The body is clever. Yes, it will adapt, but you haven't got to do anything to try and trick it. You just give it less calories than it's burning, you will get leaner. When you get to a point when you're hitting a plateau and you can't really move with your nutrition, you can't really reduce your calories much more, you can't really increase your training much more, whether that's because you're not recovering or because of work commitments, then potentially you can start playing around with what time of day you're having your carbs and your fats. But for the majority of people watching this, I wouldn't even worry. I would not worry at all. And when it does get to that level, then it's a question of trying something, trying having fats in the morning, trying having carbs at night, trying having carbs before you're training, around your workouts, on training days. You try it and you see if it works, because one size will not fit all. One diet will not work for everyone. Lower calories will work for everyone, but my diet of having a higher carb approach will not work for everyone rather. Anyway, I hope that made some sense and you enjoyed the video and you got a bit of an insight into sort of my opinion on high fat versus low fat dieting. And I will see you at the next video. Ciao.